Hello everyone and welcome to My Fantasy Journey, a channel dedicated to opinion-based fantasy book reviews. Today I'm going to be doing sort of like a double review. I'm going to be talking about two books that take part of a trilogy. The third book in this series has not been released yet, so I'm going to be talking about, of course, the first two books, which of course I own and I have read. It's a series that I was very excited about. Like the previous review that I did, I said that I was super excited about that book and I had high expectations, and it really drew my attention. But the difference between the book that I discussed in my last reviews and these is that the book that I reviewed last was pretty much a letdown. It was really disappointing, sadly. So I had high expectations, and it was kind of like a big letdown, unfortunately. But that wasn't the case with this book. I would say that with these book actually, because they're both wonderful. I would say that if they didn't fulfill all my expectations, they fulfilled most of them, and I was super excited and super happy. After I read them, I was like very pleased and just feeling very positive. And I'm pretty sure that even though I haven't read the third book, I'm pretty sure I'm going to love it, and that it's going to become one of my favorite series. So, yeah. So that being said, the books that I'm going to be discussing today are The Bear and the Nightingale and The Girl in the Tower by Catherine Arden. Now, these two books, like I said, are part of a trilogy, which is called the Winter Night Trilogy. The third book in the series is called The Winter of the Witch, and it's going to be released on January 2019. Sadly for us who love these books and the series, we're gonna have to wait a little bit, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be worth it. I'm super excited to read the third book, and I'm very happy with the series. Let me hold The Bear and the Nightingale first, because then my arm is going to become super tired of holding two hardcover books. But anyways, let's start by saying a little bit of what this book is about, just like a super general, like kind of like a summary of what this book is about. So this book takes place on medieval Russia, and it's about this girl named Vasilisa who lives with her family in the Russian wilderness. And she was born and raised listening to her grandmother's nursery and fairy and folk tales, and she was pretty much born in a village where they honor the household spirits, and those spirits that they talk so much about in their stories, and it was kind of like their tradition and culture to honor these spirits. But then Vasilisa's father, he marries this city-bred woman, who's from the capital, from Moscow, and she's kind of against all these household spirits and these things. She thinks of them as demons. So she pretty much is, against them to the point where she wants them to vanish, and she will do anything in her power to make them disappear. To the point where, things start getting mixed in with religion, because of course, like I said, she does things, they are demons, and then she tries to like vanish them away. And then when this starts to happen, the crops in the village starts to fail, things start to go wrong, because the whole spirits and the like the sprites and all that kind of like have to do with all these things, with the prosperity of the crops and the farming and all those things. So all those things start to fail and everything starts to go wrong in the village. So, then Vasilisa must do everything in her power to not allow these spirits to disappear completely, by the hand of her stepmother and other people who the stepmother summons. So that's kind of very general, very fast, like summary about this book. But anyways, let's dive right into it. Let me talk about the things that I liked first, which I must say pretty much everything. One of the things that I really liked about this book was the writing. It reads like a fairy tale, and I really appreciate that. I don't like to make comparisons, but the last book that I read, which I was expecting kind of like the same things about this book, the way it was written it felt too much. It felt too modern for me. Um, so that kind of left me disappointed. Of course, that shouldn't take away that, that a story is good or anything like that, but I was definitely expecting a different approach when it came to writing. But this book fulfilled that desire that I had. It was beautifully written. It was written like a fairy tale with a much more traditional vibe, and I absolutely love that. Catherine did a beautiful job, writing both of these books. And I really appreciate that because I do get like the traditional feel out of these books, and I love that so much. So that's definitely a plus for me. The second thing that I liked, and like I said, I don't like to compare books, but this also happened to me with my other book that I was expecting and I was disappointed, is the folk elements and like the historical and folklorical elements used in this book. They're used so well. Of course, I believe that Catherine Arden did study, like Russian culture and all that in the university, so she must know about all these things. But she did such a good use of them. I absolutely love that. I personally absolutely love Russian folklore and Russian folk tales. I have a book back here. It's this one right here. It's like my Russian folktale book, and I absolutely love them. Baba Yaga the Firebird, Ivan the Brave, all those things. I absolutely adore them. So that's one of the reasons why I was so excited about this book, and they definitely, I was not disappointed because she uses that so well. And not only does she use like the folklore, and all that, but she also uses historical facts, that makes it feel much more believable and not just like a fairy tale, which I would have been okay with, but something that feels pretty real and pretty believable because it feels like it was also, it's not only is it fantasy, but also historical. So historical fantasy, I guess. But yeah, I really like that also. She even included a glossary in the back, which I really appreciated because, sometimes you don't know like what something means because obviously she's talking about another culture and some things that obviously we're not familiarized with. So I really appreciate that she did put a glossary in the back of both books. That was really cool, going back and like reading about what she's talking about and being able to connect like the dots and stuff like that. But that being said, that was one of my favorite things about this book, the way she incorporates the history and the magic, the folklore of Russia, like the Slavic folklore, and includes all that magic and those spirits and sprites and all that. That was definitely one of the things that I was most excited about, and I was not disappointed with that. I'm very, very, very happy about that. So that's another thing I loved. Yeah, and the other thing that I love about this book is the feel that it gives you. Like I said, it reads like a fairy tale, and it feels like one too. You feel like this, I don't know if this will make sense to you guys, but this like ancient feeling that you get sometimes when you're reading folk tales. Maybe, of course, when you read like fairy tales that have been kind of like so to say, softened up or modernized or something like that, maybe you don't get that much of that feeling. You get like the magical feeling, but when you read folk tales directly, from the country and all that, you feel like you're back in time. It has like this ancient feeling, like and especially with Russian and Slavic folklore, it's very rustic and just very, very. It's different from like other folk tales that I've read, and I just absolutely love it. So I love the feeling that you get with these books. It feels very genuine and very true to to the folk tales and the folklore of Russia and the Slavic folklore and stuff like that. I think Catherine Arden did an absolutely stunning job, encompassing all that into these books, and I really appreciate that she did her research and she didn't just like put a tinge of it in there. She definitely made that a very important source and a very enjoyable one also. So that's something that I love. Something I also love is the originality of these books. It's definitely an original fairy tale. It takes elements from from other fairy tales from Russia, of course, and from the Slavic regions, because of course it has like a mixture of like the household spirit and the sprites and everything. But yeah, but even so, these books are very surprising, so it's not predictable anyway. They're very original. This is like a very original fairy tale, and such a well done one. And I applaud her for that, because sometimes, a lot of authors write fairy tales and stuff like that, and maybe they feel like what's gonna happen, um, or sometimes it's kind of like generic and stuff like that. And I love fairy tales, so I usually do enjoy fairy tales, but these were particularly so well done and so original, and I really, really appreciate that. And yeah, and something else that I liked, of course, I didn't love every character, but the main character, Vasilisa, I love to see how she grew up and how she changed throughout the book. Of course, in the second book, there's even more of that also, because it is a character who's developing, and I just love to see that, and I just love her character so much, that because sometimes I feel like related to her in a way, like embracing like those magical beings and stuff like that, and just defending, something that she believed in, and just being so strong. She's a very strong character, and I love that. And the relationships that she has with her family and stuff like that. I would have liked to know a little bit more of some other characters also, but even so, it's not something that was completely. It's not like the characters were like completely like you know um undeveloped or anything like that. So overall, it was wonderfully done with the characters. Also, some characters I would have liked to know a little bit more about, but even so, I think she did a great job also with that. And yeah, and giving them that feel, and like her brothers and sisters, and the time they were living in, and decisions that they would make and stuff like that. That was really cool. So I liked a whole bunch of things about this book, but yeah, for now, what I can get out of my head is that. So that being said, let's talk about the things that I didn't like. Like I said, I pretty much like everything about this book, but the only thing that I didn't like, and that goes also for the second one, and also for the book that I reviewed last time, for my previous review, is the romance. The romance in these books is not as bad as the book that I previously. Like I said, I don't like to compare, but it's definitely not as bad as the book that I previously read. That one was definitely just dreadful and just not good at all. I didn't like the romance in this book. But it's not that I was completely upset about it. And it's not that she made it into something very sticky and just very unpleasant and uncomfortable or anything like that. No, it wasn't like that. But I just felt that it would have been better if it was left out. I would have much preferred that. Because for me, I don't know. I don't want to say what the romance is about and which characters get into romance, because then I will spoil. But I just felt like, and if you read this book, let me know if you agree. I know that a lot of people are into the romance, but I'm just not. But if you have read this book and you know what I'm talking about, let me know what you think about this. But I felt like it wasn't. It just didn't feel right. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm more. I don't know. I don't know, but I just didn't like the romance. For me, it felt a little bit out of place, but at least it didn't feel so sticky and just like the one that I previously read that was just absolutely awful. And this one is much more subtle. So at least I appreciate that. At least even if she did introduce that romance that I don't approve of, at least it wasn't like in my face and just like So that I appreciate, but I just felt like the romance didn't. It just didn't. It just didn't feel right, because of the characters that were involved in that, but that's just me. So the thing that I didn't like, and that I think that's all that I can say that I didn't like about this book. Sometimes it did get very dark, and there were themes that maybe some people would be a little bit sensible with, especially if you're religious. Sometimes it does involve like themes and aspects that you might be like, I don't know how I feel about that. But after all, this is a fairy tale, and it does have to do a lot with paganism, of course. So, I didn't really like felt out of place or anything. I actually thought it was very interesting, the approach that she took, and very original. So I really like that. But yeah, it did get really somber sometimes, but that's definitely not a bad thing for me. So that's kind of like the only bad thing that I can say about, about that, about this book. I didn't really feel like anything else was wrong. Everything else, was, I wouldn't say this was a perfect book, but everything else was pretty strong and very solid. So yeah, for sure. I would I can't think of anything else that I strongly, like felt like bothered with. At least from the top of my head right now. So, what would I give this book? I would give it a 4.5 out of 5, and the only reason that I didn't give it a 5 is because of the romance, like I said. But other than that, it was very enjoyable, and awesome debut, kind of book, because I think this is her first like book that she like wrote and published, at least. So and an awesome, amazing beginning for the series, for sure. So The Bird and Nightingale. So let me talk a little bit now about the second book in the trilogy, which is The Girl in the Tower. So this book, of course, follows up with Vasilisa after she, she tries to like go and kind of like keep the house spirits and all that, defend all that she believes in. So this kind of follows that. I don't know if I should talk too much about it because I don't want to spoil like what happens in the other one. But pretty much, she escapes. I'm not gonna say the reasons why, but pretty much she escapes from the village that she lives in because of things that happened, and she kind of conceals her identity dressing up as a boy, and she escapes to see the world, and she comes to the medieval Moscow, and then a lot of things happen there. There's like a bandit on the loose who are burning villages, and not only is there like a political kind of problem going on in Moscow and Russia, but also kind of like a cultural kind of problem, of course, with the household spirits and the beliefs in the Shayarti, which are like the sprites and and all those magical beings. So yeah, and Shimon's like also like battle those forces. So that's kind of like what this book is about. It I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give up like little details of what happened in the last one. So things that I liked about this book, pretty much the same about the other one. It was wonderfully written. The elements of folklore and history are spot on, very solid. This one also, like I said, has like a little glossary on the back, which I appreciate. And yeah, just like the use of Russian history and folklore and culture was wonderful also. Yeah, and it was a very also like a very intense book. It was definitely that the first one was, intense in some parts, of course, but this one was definitely more like action packed and like more intense in more parts. So yeah, like this one, the first one, The Bird and Nightingale, is more like a rural, pastoral kind of like setting in fairy tale. But this one, like I said, she does. It takes. There is like obviously because it is like the medieval and Russia, and of course it's a fairy tale, and there's like different settings. But so of course there's forests and villages and stuff like that. But it's Moscow, the city of Moscow, medieval Moscow. It's a very important setting in this book. So yeah, it's mostly written around that, you know, so it mostly takes place on medieval Moscow. And yeah, so the use of history and the use of historical facts and all that was done so exceptionally. It was, you know, like I said, the same as with the first ones, very spot on, very strong. And the way it was written, that was written like a fairy tale. And yeah, just the whole adventure, those moments that are full of suspense and all that you don't know what's gonna happen, and also to see how far the character has come, and all that was very wonderful. And I loved how she developed this very strong character that she created. I love that. So kind of the positive things, you know, that I have to say about this book are kind of like the same as the Bird and Nightingale. Of course it is a different story, but it's kind of the same. I loved both. And the thing that I didn't like about this book is the same, like that weird romance between some characters. I just didn't really enjoy it. Here it wasn't also like super like in your face. It got a little bit more intimate because of course like the character, you know, the romance also developed in a way. It didn't get like intimate to the, you know, to that point or anything. If you know what I mean. But it, you know, of course the romance also evolved in a way, and I just do not really approve of it. For me, the romance was unnecessary, and it felt a little bit weird because of what the characters are, especially one of them. So if you know what I'm talking about, let me know in the comment section. But other than that, that's like the only, you know, like negative thing. Oh, and something also that it's not a negative thing, but it's something that I would have liked if it would have been a little bit more developed in a way, was some of the characters that are based on Russian folklore. I would have liked if they were kind of like more, how do I say this, more developed. Not that they weren't, like, they were very present, and she does talk a lot about them, but I would have liked to know more about them, and I would have liked them to be more rooted to the actual like fairy tale and to the actual like character in the folk tales. They were, of course, rooted to that, and of course, you know, there are real characters in the Russian and Slavic fairy tales and folk tales. But I would have liked to know specifically of two characters. If one of them, I don't know if it could be considered a character, but yeah, I would have liked to know a little bit more about them, and I would have liked them to be a little bit more, at least if there was more background on them and a little bit more of that, of those roots, you know, instead of just being like there. I would have loved to like you know, like explore them a little bit more in their origins and stuff like that, if that makes any sense. If you read the book, like I said, let me know if you know what I'm talking about. But that's like the only thing that I would say that I didn't like about this book. That's pretty much the only thing. I will say I think I did enjoy the first one more, because I'm more because I did enjoy more like the inclusion of like sprites and like spirits and like those beings more in the first one. And it did have, like I said, a more pastoral, more naturey kind of feeling to it. They both do, but I mean, of course this one takes more place in medieval Moscow. But yeah, this one felt very rural and very very naturey, and I did like the inclusion of the creatures and, you know, the folk tales and the fairy tales and folklore more on the first one. But still, that being said, I give this book still also like the first one a 4.5 out of 5. Wonderful, wonderful book, and a wonderful follow-up to the first book. So that being said, who would I recommend these books to? If you're into fairy tales, very well written fairy tales, definitely give this book a try. Give this trilogy a try, especially if you're into Russian folklore like I am, you know, and you're into folk tales also. if you're a lot into folktale and folklore and culture, and even I'm particularly not really interested in history, even though I'm interested in folklore. I guess that is part of history, but but anyways, if you're interested in like fairy tales that have a tinge of history, fairy tales that are not only like things with like castles and dragons, like your traditional kind of fairy tales, you have like all those traditional elements. So if you're looking for a more original fairy tale and like that reads like an actually like a classic fairy tale and has those actually genuine rooted elements of folklore and and the culture of in this case of Russia and the Slavic costumes and all that, definitely give these books a try because you won't be disappointed. Uh yeah, so and also if you're looking for like kind of like a darker fairy tale also that's not like, oh, everything's like pretty and pink and oh, the prince is going to rescue me, kind of like that traditional fairy tales. A fairy tale that involves much more like complex and darker themes. Definitely give these a try. You won't be disappointed. Who would I not recommend this to? Well, if you're not into Slavic folklore and like Slavic culture, I guess, and Russian folk tales and stuff like that, then I guess you won't really like that book. And I do say that because I do have a friend that she told me I don't really want to read these books because I'm not into that. So maybe, of course, if you're not, I would still say that you give them a try. You're not gonna. I don't. I think that won't be kind of like too much of a drawback. But if you're not into like folklore and like more historical rooted and culture rooted fairy tales, then maybe this one's not for you. If you're more into like traditional fairy tales, then you might not like this one. And if you don't like a somber, more dark, much more dark and serious tone to your fairy tales, which I personally like, also do not read this. And if you're more into YA, I would say that these are more like adult fairy tales. Not that there's like a lot of like adult content. It's funny because in the previous book that I reviewed, there was more adult content, but it was YA. But these like don't have like too, for now, of course, like explicit stuff and stuff like that. But they are much more mature books than the book that I previously released, and just better written and much more well developed and simply better in general. In my opinion, of course, that's just my opinion. Yeah, but if you are more into like the traditional, more light-hearted fantasies, you don't really care about history and or like the folklore, especially like Russian and Slavic, and if you're not into like the culture and stuff like that, and if you're a little bit touchy with religious topics and stuff like that, then I wouldn't recommend these books. But other than that, I would tell you to give them a try, especially if you're just like into fantasy and you're not super picky. These are absolutely stellar fantasy books, and I cannot wait for the third book. Like I said, such original, such rich stories, and such fun and beautiful reads. So yeah, that's what I have to say about these books, and I'm super happy about them. So if you're not super picky, give them a try. So yeah, that kind of concludes my reviews on this book. Did I say what I, yeah, 4.5 for both of them. And like I said, I do prefer the first one to the second one, but they're both wonderful. So yeah, now this is the end of my review. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Have you guys read The Bear Nightingale and The Girl in the Tower? Have you read just The Bear Nightingale? Are you looking forward to The Girl in the Tower? Have you read both of them? Are you excited as I am? And the third book, The Winter of the Witch, I cannot wait for it to be released. What do you guys think about these books? Did you get what I was talking about when I said, about the folk characters, the folktale characters? Did you get what I said when I talked about the romance and all those things? Let me know in the comment below. Let's talk about these books and let me know your opinions, what you guys agree, what you guys don't disagree with, and all those good things. So yeah, if you want to embark on this journey with me, Feel free to hit that subscribe button. I'm going to be doing a lot of cool reviews and really awesome magical books. So if you want to see those, definitely hit that subscribe button and we shall embark on this journey together. So that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Keep reading and I'll see you on my next review. Bye.